Shalom. Our Torah portion this week is Vayikra, known in English as Leviticus. And without a doubt, this is the most difficult book for modern Jews to relate to, inasmuch as this book and this Sedra specifically deal with the subject of animal sacrifices. Right at the beginning of the book of Leviticus, we are told of 5 sacrifices that were to be made in the tabernacle and later on in the temple that would be built in Jerusalem. Now, the problem that we moderns have with animal sacrifices is this: why would God want us to sacrifice animals to show our devotion to God? Now, according to Maimonides, the great Jewish philosopher of the Middle Ages, he said that God didn't need us to sacrifice animals, that this was a way of the Jews organizing themselves in those early days in a world in which everyone sacrificed animals. Some people even sacrificed human beings, which was a total which was totally forbidden in our tradition. And he points out that, and it's been pointed out by others as well, as the sacrifices were limited in scope and limited to one place, and that was Jerusalem. You couldn't just sacrifice an animal in your own property somewhere in another part of Israel. You had to be in Israel. So it was a way of bringing the people toward a higher form of devotion to God, but at the same time recognizing that this was the common practice of humanity at the time. But still, we moderns look at Vayikra and we wonder, what does this have to do with us? And yet we have to understand that much of modern Jewish liturgy is based on what took place in the temple during the period in which sacrifices were made. The book of Psalms, and we sing so many of the Psalms on the Sabbath and on the holidays, were songs that were sung during the time of the sacrifices. The Levites, many of them were musicians, and we still sing many of those songs. The morning service and the afternoon service, that is the Shachrit service and the Mincha service, are in place of the morning and the afternoon sacrifices that were made on a daily basis in Jerusalem, in the temple. In more traditional synagogues, we have something called the Musaf service, which means the additional service on the Sabbath and on holidays. Why? Because an additional sacrifice was made on Shabbat and on the holidays. We also see a reflection of the temple service, of the sacrificial services, when we look at the Torah, when we look at the way that we point and decorate the Torah. We see that the Torah has a mantle on it, and a crown, and a breastplate, and many Torahs are decorated with little bells that ring as it's brought through the congregation. These reflect the costume that the high priest wore, the one who officiated at the temple over the sacrifices. And yet, we modern Jews, for the most part, don't relate to animal sacrifices in of themselves, even though in Orthodox congregations to this day, prayers are uttered in a request that God brings the animal sacrifices back into existence, something that we Reformed Jews do not do. But to be fair to our ancestors, to really understand our ancestors and to appreciate their spiritual intent, we have to know that the word sacrifice in Hebrew is korban, which means literally to be close, or it's related to the word to approach or to be close. The goal of Judaism in ancient days and in modern times is to be near God, is to live as godly of a life as we can. I like the formula that one of the rabbis put forth in Pirkei Avot in the Talmud. He said, the world is sustained by three things. I would say that Judaism is sustained and upheld by three things, and they are these: Torah, the study of Torah, worship, and acts of loving kindness. Let's take a look at the first few words of this week's Torah portion in the Hebrew, and then I'm going to share with you the words of Yochanan ben Zakkai, a very famous Jewish sage of old. Vayikra el Moshe, Vaydaber Adonai elav, me'ohel moed limor, daber el bnei Yisrael, va'amarta alehem, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban ladonai min habehema, min habakar, umin hatzon, takrivu et korbanchem. The Eternal One called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, When any of you presents an offering of cattle to the Eternal, you shall choose your offering from the herd or the flock. Okay. The section of the Torah that I just read specified certain animals that were to be sacrificed. They could be from a flock or from a herd. But what happened to the Jewish people after the year 70, when the temple was destroyed and animal sacrifices were no longer available, that Jews had no place to make those animal sacrifices? To show you what happened, I have a story here about Yochanan ben Zakkai, a great sage who survived the siege of Jerusalem and then went on to establish the yeshiva in the city of Yavne. It is said of him, once when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was leaving Jerusalem, Rabbi Joshua was walking behind him and saw the temple in ruins. Rabbi Joshua said, Woe is us that this has been destroyed, the place where atonement was made for the sins of Israel. And Yochanan ben Zakkai replies to Joshua, No, my son, do you not know that we have a means of making atonement that is like it? And what is it? It is deeds of love. As it is said, and he now quotes Hosea chapter 6, verse 6, For I, and this is God speaking, for I desire kindness, not sacrifice. Isn't that remarkable? God says, I desire kindness, not sacrifice. And Yochanan ben Zakkai goes on to say, from now on, our prayers are going to be our offerings. And I think that this is our sacrifice. This is our offering to God. Our good works, our deeds of loving kindness toward one another, and our prayers. These are our korbanot. These are our ways of being close to our God. I hope that you will read this week's Torah portion and come to your own conclusions. Shabbat Shalom.